Yo, what's up, everyone? This is Swa, and I am here today joined by my good friend Theo, also student and patron of the Patreon as well. Say hey,
Hello.
Theo. But yeah, today I am going to be going over showing y'all and decoding the mystery of texture atlasing. A lot of people throw that around, but don't actually explain what the heck it is. I'm going to do that in depth from start to finish today. So, essentially, what that is taking multiple textures and materials and combining them into fewer, if not just a singular material. So, my avatar here, which is my main driver, I had to optimize it for shader motion for Slyfest this year. Here's the duplicate of the avatar with both meshes. So being that we're just going to want to combine everything all together, I'm just going to select both these guys. I also have my screencast keys on so you can see what keys I press. So once I have both these selected with control, I'm just going to hit Control J to join both meshes, and now we have one singular mesh. So now what I'm going to do...
I remember it was really confusing for me at first to remember that where your cursor is on the screen when you're doing these commands is also just as important as the commands themselves.
Exactly, yeah. If I did Control J over this, I believe it would still combine them. But if I had it over this area, I don't think it would do the same thing. So yeah, thank you, Theo. That's a good thing to remember, that you kind of forget to go over, is Blender does have different keyboard commands. Yeah, once we have both of those meshes combined together, I'm going to hit Edit while over the viewport to take us into edit mode, and we can see which materials are mapped where. And I like to keep the UV sync selection on, so it shows all of the materials and their UV mappings. And so the next step that we're going to have to do is we have to create a new UV map, because we're going to be moving around all of these textures' faces, as well as shrinking them down to map to our new texture before we bake them. And baking is also another term thrown around a lot, and it's not really explained too far in depth. So yeah, texture atlasing and baking are going to be the two things that we're explaining in this. So baking basically is just creating a new texture based off of where the new UV coordinates are for the textures and materials. And that's one of the final steps that we implement as far as creating a new texture atlas as well. So what I'm going to do, and this UV mapping is per mesh. So if, let's say, we create a UV map on another mesh and we were to try and combine it, it just wouldn't work, because the two have different UV mappings based off of where they are. So it's related to the mesh itself and like the placement of the UVs. So you can still have UVs and materials mapped to the same UV map, but if they overlap, then you're going to have conflicts of where it is baked when you go to bake during that step. I don't want to really show an example of that in this. Maybe that might be for another video to explain like the differences. And so let me just come down here to our UV map area, and we're going to create a new UV mapping. Now there are these camera icons, and we're just going to make sure that we have our initial and original UV map with the camera icon turned on, because we're going to want to take the original mappings of where these textures are and bake them to our new texture atlas. And this is going to become the new UV mapping for our data. What we're going to want to make sure of is we're going to make sure all of our materials got sent over to our singular mesh now that we have everything combined together. And we're going to want to see and determine how big we're going to make our atlas. So initially I had planned out that we would need about 4K for the size of this. So just to show you guys kind of like, let's see, transparent atlas. So this one's a 4K atlas, but being that on this material, it's just stuff like the skin, the irises and eyebrows and stuff. Those don't need to be that large on the atlas. So we'll probably only need to dedicate maybe about 1.5 to 2K for the transparent materials. So
it's kind of complicated when you look at it and you see all of the vertices of everything displayed on top of one another. Is there any way to make it so you just see one level at a time and they're not all stacked on top of one another like that, to give you a better idea of how much empty space you've got?
Yeah, so one of the things we can do is we can turn off the sync selection, and so this will just show like the original transparent atlas. So if we hit select, we can see all of the pieces of the transparencies being used. What I will do now is we still have that one selected because that's going to be the one we want to edit. And let's see. So yeah, like I said, just going through and determining based off of the scale and size of each texture, you can kind of plan out how you're going to do your new texture for everything. So like I said, I determined beforehand that I'm going to need about 4K of space. So I'm just going to do a 4K texture. So
when you determine that, do you usually just add up the amount of space for each texture, like in Notepad or something? And just add it up?
Yeah, so for Notepad, or I'll do it with the calculator and just add up the... for this one, it's 8K, but I determined based off of... It's more so the level importance of each part of the avatar you're wanting to give the most detail or not give the most detail. So even though it does say 8K by 4K for this single material, I determined that, like, well, maybe the shoes we're not going to need as much detail, as well as the arms and all that, so we can make those a lot smaller. So being that the vertical part of this avatar is going to be 4K, we can sacrifice just like a lot of these other UVs more than others, because I mean 4K is still pretty high level of detail.
And they don't need to be square?
They don't necessarily need to be square. Yeah, as long as the dimensions themselves are squared. It's just recommended for textures themselves to be like a squared value. I'm not entirely
just a power
sure.
of 2?
Power of 2, correct.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it can be whatever the dimensions are for this. It's not quite 16 by 9, but they're both the horizontal and vertical values are powers of 2. So yes, all good questions. Thank you, Theo. Again, guys, this is why I have Theo here, because Theo is also, like I mentioned in the beginning, a student of mine, and she is slowly but surely learning avatar creation and optimization as well. So, yeah.
And if I can do it, literally anyone can do it. So can you.
Yes. So, next step will be to, like I said, I've already predetermined that 4K by 4K is the dimensions that will be good enough for retaining the quality of this avatar. So being, like I said, this one was one that I already optimized beforehand. You can see that from the original to this one's the original, green outlined. This one is the one that I atlased. There's pretty much no differentiation between the two. Yes. So what we'll do is I will come over here. We're going to say our new atlas, and let's call Sweet Shoot on site. Shoot on site 4K. And I'm going to keep alpha checked off because we're going to need that level of alpha when we do our composite image for the transparencies on the avatar.
Does the color just make things easier to see but won't ultimately matter?
Are you saying
where it has the black color up above the alpha?
Oh yeah, so what that is that's just going to be default fill color. So if we wanted to do, instead of no alpha, it would just be a black background. We're going to keep alpha checked off because we're going to need that in the end no matter what. And I'm going to select color grid because that gives us the indication of where our quadrants are for each level of the 4K dimensions based off of so let's, here, I'll just show you the color grid. So get this nice and pretty color grid. Each quadrant or each part of this is 1024, 1024, 1024, 1024. I'm sorry. Each two levels is going to be 1024, equaling 4096 at the end. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then by 1, 2, 3, 4. So yeah. So they're all split up into these little grids, which you can see are all of our pixels. So we come all the way in here. Yeah, where's the indicator? It's like a little ruler that I can use, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. All you need to know is this is 4K by 4K. And actually, if we come over here, we can see the image generated 4096 by 4096. Color grid, color space is sRGB. There we go. So now the fun part. I'm going to come in and I'm going to actually keep the sync selection on so that we can see all of our UV mappings all on one screen. Just because this is gonna be where we're shifting everything around now. So I'm gonna hit select, and now this is only the t-shirt UVs selected. You can see it kind of got squished a little bit because the original atlas is actually double this height because it's a vertical texture. So what I'll do to actually scale that properly so it doesn't squish those UVs when we go to bake it is I'm going to hit S to scale. I'm going to hit the Y button to lock it to the Y axis. And then I'm going to scale it by 1.5. So we have this is going to be the proper scaling for the UVs. So
and if you weren't going to scale it properly, then it would appear squished in the final bake?
In the final bake, it would appear squished. It might look okay on the mesh once it's applied as the new material, but just to, let's say, if you were wanting to add a design later on, it might look squished and the pixels might actually look squished themselves if you had like really fine lines. So just getting into the good practice of when you do a new bake, which actually I might increase the size just a little bit more. I'm going to do 1.2. Yeah, because that looks a little bit better. That looks actually more how the t-shirt is laid out. So I'm just going to look at it from the front. Yeah, you can see that looks a little bit better in terms of the scaling, so it wouldn't be squished. Yeah, and that's, like I said, that's just if you're going to look to add new designs in the future and you don't want it to be stretched or squished or anything, then baking it like this, or at least with this, with these dimensions, it will keep it as crisp and as clean as possible. Yeah, very good question. So yeah, with that, now that I have that, just only that material selected, I'm gonna move it off of the main grid because that's where we're gonna start kind of puzzle piecing and tangramming everything together. So I hit G to grab the UVs and Y to align it to the Y-axis. So when I move it, it just moves it straight up.
And when you press those keys, do you press G and then Y and then move it?
Correct. Yeah, because if you hit Y, I believe actually splits your selection. So yeah, that's another thing. That's a very good question too, because yeah, G and then in succession with that Y to align it to your Y-axis when you move
And
it.
then when you're done doing that, you click away?
Click with the left click. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So again, we're going to move up to the next material. We can see this one is absolutely squished horizontally because it was a horizontal texture. So what we'll do before moving this one off to the side is we'll hit S to scale, X to lock our scale to the horizontal axis, and we'll do again scale it by 1.5. That doesn't look like enough.
I think it was a 8K by 4K, so maybe do it by 2.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to do S and then again lock it to the X axis, and I'm going to do by 2. There we go. Yeah, that looks like it's original dimensions. The one way you can tell is the face on this avatar in particular is pretty circular, so the way that we could tell that it wasn't scaled properly is because it looked more like an oval. So yeah, one thing I can tell you already, I'm not going to need as much detail, even though in my shoes that I have on my avatar there is a knit pattern, so I might want to retain quite a bit of the let's say like the fidelity of this texture, but not as much as, let's say, the face, where it has like more detail, especially if, let's say, you have tattoos on your face or something, or you have makeup and you don't want to stretch those pixels, so you want to retain a lot of the quality of that. But we'll do that in the next step after we move everything off. So I'm going to do again G and then X to align it to the X axis when I move it, and then I'm going to left click to confirm that movement of moving the UVs off to the side. Next one is our hair, and for that one I'm not going to lock the selection. I'm just going to hit G to move it, and I'm going to move it right about there, and then left click and left click again to deselect it. Logos, we have, that's going to be the tattoo. For that one though, you can see my tattoo is pretty squished, and again, that's a circular tattoo, so I'm going to make sure to scale it. Let's see, S, Y axis, and I'm going to do by 2, and yeah, there we go. So that's the original dimensions for that.
It also looks like you'll be getting rid of a lot of stuff that you're not even using on this avatar, which is going to be
right, like the
saving
streaming.
a lot of space.
That's right. So, yeah, and that will be one thing that I'll actually do is I'll get rid of a couple of the things that I won't need, like the streaming icon. Again, because this is going to be used for shader motion, and they're not going to need more than what I have on the avatar, because it's not going to have any mouth movement. It's not going to have the animations to bring up, let's say, like my streaming placard, so I can get rid of all those. Actually, I might just get rid of them right now. So I can select that, and then I can, over the viewport, I just hit X and then delete vertices. So now when we get our texture bake, it's not going to bake that on the final atlas. Same thing as, I don't think from this view that we're going to see any mouth. Actually, I'll keep that. We'll just lower the amount of detail for the mouth when we get there. Yeah, what's up?
With the streaming icon, obviously it's not showing in this mode. So if you had left it and like baked it on, how would you have known like what it looked like when you were done if it's not showing up on your avatar right now?
The thing is here, let me actually, just to show you, I'll go back to where I had the UVs for it. So you can see it's actually really teeny tiny. It's like so small that we can't see it because it's scaled down with a blend shape. So if I scroll all the way down here to where I have my blend shapes, let's see, there should be one called, there's one called streaming. So if I hit the, if in edit mode I click on streaming, it'll actually show us what it looks like.
When the blend shape is fully activated?
Correct, yeah, 100%. So you can see right here, it has the dot, and then it has the text that says streaming. And
that's a good way to keep it active when it's for an animation, so that people will see it even if they have animations turned off, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's correct. Yeah. Yum. That's correct. So I'm going to go back to the basis key and because if I was to delete it when we're not on the basis key, some bad maths would happen. So I'm just going to delete it while on the basis key because we're not going to need that in the final bake. But yeah, the final bake, if I did have these faces still, or just for that matter, like the geometry for it, it would still take up just this slight bit of space on the atlas. So being that we're not going to need it for this version, once it deletes it there, it deletes it from the UV editing mode because it's not using that part, which you can see down here. It's not using this small part of the texture atlas anymore, so it's not going to bake that at all. Because it's not a part of the geometry anymore. Because remember, this UV data is what's going to be baked for the new image that we're going to have for our atlas. So, and again, this camera icon is selected on this because this is the original UV data that we're going to then bake, or in a sense, print to the new texture atlas, this one that we're building right now. So yep, so yeah, camera icon indicating that it's taking from this original mapping and then printing to the new UV mapping that we're creating right now, which is this second one. Makes sense? A little more. It's a lot of info, but
no, it's important to know what to have selected and what to not have selected in a program like Blender, just because things can get so wonky so easily.
Yep, absolutely. So second to last texture, this is the transparent atlas. So that's the last stuff that we have on this UV grid. So what I'm actually gonna do, let's do it, let's see, I'm gonna do eyeballs by eyeballs. So
so like the good guy Terminator with the blue eyes instead of the red eyes.
Right. So yeah, I'm gonna want to keep a little bit of the detail in my my irises, because they do have here, watch, if we zoom in, I do have some kind of nice granular type of just to make it look like their irises. So I want to retain as much quality in those, and everything else can be scaled down quite a bit. So being that this is 512, so this is 1K right here, I'm probably going to want to actually, each iris make it 512. So I'll just size those down like that. Actually, I'm realizing.
How much space do you want to leave in between each one of these?
Another very, very good question. Because you have the option of determining the size of your margins when you bake your textures. Because if you don't have a margin and the UV is really close to the edge, you may get whatever color is bleeding off, or you'll also get some transparency which like this avatar is going to have transparencies. So if we had no margin, you'd run the risk of, if you shifted any of these UVs, or just the nature of how UVs map on an avatar, you'll actually get you'll get what's called as what's it called? It's essentially like bleeding of edges.
That
So
makes
you
sense. Like if you zoom in on the pixels and you can see the lighter gray and the darker gray pixels when you get really, really close,
mhm.
then it's like if those were to be touching, then it would be essentially be a pixel trying to be two colors at once, and that just wouldn't work.
Correct. Yeah. So I'll actually show that right now. So I'm in the incorrect render engine. So when we do our texture baking, that's going to be in the cycles engine, and I like to keep GPU compute on because it uses the GPU to bake the textures. So it goes a little bit quicker, but yeah, so I'm going over this step a little bit earlier because you asked about it. So you can see here in the bake options and cycles, we have all these options, bake type, blah, 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 all this. Bake type just basically means which parts you're going to want to bake to your new texture. So you have transmission, diffuse, emission, roughness, normal mapping. But more often than not, you're going to be wanting to take image textures you already have some shading and normal mapping done on them already. So more often than not, you'll just do the color with the diffuse because this is just taking the texture and baking it straight to the new atlas. So and if you do have other parts of your avatar that do have normal mapping and stuff, there are ways of you just unplug the normal map node in the shader editor on the materials for the avatar, and you plug them into the base color, and then that will bake the normal map information. So you can atlas normal maps all together in one texture, so it also creates an atlas for those as well. So
does a normal map count as its own material in Unity?
No, it doesn't count as its own material because it's all part of the material itself. So you can see I have like this alpha node, this base color node, and then there's a normal mapping. Not on this. This one doesn't actually have a normal map texture, but the principled BSDF, I can't remember what BSDF is, but I think it's base. I don't know off the top of my head what BSDF stands for, but basically this is just one material itself. So if we go to like all of our materials, this one material, two materials, 3, 4, 5, and so each one can have its base color, roughness map, normal map, emission map, and yeah, so that those in and of itself, even though you have 3 or 4 materials, or not materials, I'm sorry, textures mapped to one material, that still counts as a singular material. Yep.
Sounds good.
Cool. So, yeah, we have our irises mapped. So I'm going to actually, because I believe that, yeah, those are the eye, like the
pupils, or
those are the.
Oh, it's the background, the white background.
It's not the white background. It's actually the glint, like the glare on the eye, like the eye.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's this right here. It's this little area. So, yeah, and then all the rest is transparent. So, even though you can't see those areas, you still need that area to be visible as far as the UV mapping, so that you have the room to allow for when you bake the transparency on it. And you'll see that step pretty soon here. So I believe that these are, those are eyebrows.
That's a lot of space for eyebrows. Why is it that you leave so much extra room?
It's just how the eyebrows were mapped before. So yeah, technically, you know what? I could probably, it's a good question. I could probably just come in and only select the parts of the eyelashes I need. Yeah. Very, very good question. So I'll do, or no, wait. Yeah. Just come in here. Have only the parts of the eyes that I'm going to need. Delete. Ooh.
Oop. And this won't affect your ability to get angry, right?
No, it will not. Yeah,
Phew.
because it's just the UVs that, so we'll do this. Faces, and yeah, we have that amount left for the eyebrows. So, yeah, it looks like they're being squished a little bit, so I'm going to just do S and then X2, SX2 to make sure that they're spaced properly. And then I'm going to scale
So we
them
can make
down.
out every individual hair that you so lovingly mapped on there earlier.
Yes.
In the previous video that was on eyebrow mapping.
Yes, exactly. Perfect. So, have our eyebrows in this area. Looks good to me. And then, what was this? I think that's, oh yeah, those are eyelashes.
Yeah, you have enormous eyelashes too.
Enormous. Enormous. Yeah.
Is that what often causes people's models, if you don't have the shaders turned on, for Vroid models, for example, to have like big white pieces coming out?
That's due to the fact, and I actually just noticed that from this past festival, that even with me doing what I thought was what you need to do to go back to a fallback shader, still resulted in my eyes being completely black on these parts.
So it looks like your actual eyelashes are not part of those blue mappings. So what are those blue mappings for?
Actually, these are my eyelashes. Oh, wait.
But see, like, oh, it's a little bit of your eyelashes, but then you have those brown parts that appear to be on something different.
Right. Let's see.
Oh, it's like the inner corners of your eyes and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just like another added layer
Oh,
of
it's
the
probably-
eyelashes. So, yeah, but I think that might be a good area. I'm just gonna leave it because at the end, anyway, it's just transparencies that show up. So I'm gonna drag these guys down here, and I'm gonna actually move it so they don't need to be too large
And-
either.
When you're selecting with that tool, are you pressing C?
Oh, right. Yes. Another good question. I did mention that in the last one that I did. The live stream I did where no one saw. But yes, C to select, and then left click and holding left click while you drag and select. And then right click to confirm your selection. But yeah, to deselect, you just hit Alt A, and that will just deselect everything. So, yeah, very good question too. C, paint selection, and then right click to deselect, and then Alt A to deselect all after confirming your movement. Yeah. So, let's see. This was which parts? Oh, you know what? These are parts I do not need. I never use these, so I'm gonna actually
Those are the worst.
delete all these guys because I do
This
not
is-
need those.
Personal opinion. I am not representing SWA Corp when I say this, but those are the worst. They're the worst
They are.
expression
They
ever.
are. Yes. So we definitely do not need those. So now these guys right here are for sure the eyelashes. Yes. Those are the eyelashes. Those also I'm gonna expand on the x-axis because I don't want them to get squished too much. And I'm gonna scale them just enough to where they fit inside of this area. And then right click to confirm the selection. And let's see. Oh, you know what? It might be a little bit better if I do it this way. And I'm just going to do this. Put them all so that they're in the same general vicinity of one another. So yeah, that looks like it's a good area for the shirt and a good size. So I'm just gonna bring that down. May have to actually. Oh, you know what? That's
Wow.
getting really close, but that
Yeah.
looks pretty good. So now that we have all of our materials all set in place, the next step is one that took me a minute to kind of understand and remember to do, because again, this process is so much different than the original one. You can see actually all of these nodes that I added beforehand. So I'm going to remove them so I can like demonstrate the process again.
How did you get the node screen to show up again?
The node screen, so what you're going to do is, usually down here by default is the timeline for creating animations, or if you have a video that you're working on, the timeline pops up. But down here, you just click and drag up the window, and you're going to click this icon in the bottom left. You have all the different views. So you can bring up another viewport if you're wanting to. Let's say you're setting up like a camera angle and you're wanting to see what the camera looks like, or you're wanting to pull up the UV editor like this window over here.
And see like the front and the back of you at the same time or something.
Yep. Yeah. So then you have this shader editor that you're going to click, and then it brings up for each material that you click on, it's going to pull up and show each node editor for each one. So you can connect all of your textures. You can also, if you have your window open with, let's say, your textures, you can just click and drag those straight into here and then connect them to the base color to assign them to your avatar. So for this next step, this is where the step right before we bake our new UV map to our new texture atlas. So what we're going to need to do is we hit Shift A, and that brings up the add box, and we're going to add a texture, an image texture, and we're just going to left click to drop it here, and we're going to browse our images. And being that we're going to look for the SWE shoot on site 4K, and I'm just going to type in shoot, and we can see the rainbow right here. And so now this texture node is selected as our baking output for our new image. And so we want to make sure that this is the last node that we have selected before moving on to the next material. And we're going to hit Control C to copy it, because then we're going to paste it to each material. And make sure you left click and select it. Same thing for the hair, left click and select it. Same thing here, left click and select it. Same thing here, Control V to paste it and select it. Because then we go.
And each one of these materials has its own node display like that?
Correct, yeah.
So they're not all on the same graph, but just like spread out. They each have their own.
Yeah, and they're each texture that is assigned. So this one is like the shard t-shirt texture. This one is the opskin tubular atlas texture, and so on and so forth. So then what we do, after adding those nodes, we're assigning again, just to go over again, we're assigning the new texture that we made with the new UV selected as well. But the reason we have the camera icon on this one shown is because we're wanting to bake the original UV mapping to this new UV map that we created. So again, like if I click this and select it, if we were to bake, it would bake and look completely horrific because everything's overlaid. But that's why we create this new one, is because we're shifting everything over to create a completely fully customized singular texture atlas. Yeah, and then the reason we're adding this new texture node at the end is because this is going to be the new output for when we create our bake. And the reason we select this as the last one is we want that to be the last active texture that we're selecting, so it knows that we're baking to it. So see how these are all, they have the green selection box around them. It's because it's the last node that we had selected. Yep. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to hit tab to go back out of edit mode, and it's not going to show anything selected here. Render properties. We're going to scroll all the way down. We're going to make sure again that we're in cycles, because you can only do texture baking in cycles. GPU compute, I do, so it uses my GPU to render. And then I have it set to bake type diffuse. I only have color selected because we're just baking the color and the image textures from the or actually no, this image textures means that it's baking to the image texture we have selected. And then our margins set at 16 pixels to give us that breathing room around our new UV mapping. And then we just hit bake, and then we can see progress bar here down at the bottom. I can try it again. Yeah, sometimes it does that where if we hit reload and we just rebake quickly, it'll it could have been also from the last, because this is the same project from when I did the the last baking. So beautiful.
Hey, it looks really good. And so does the smiley face in the lower right hand corner.
It does. Look at that. Look at that.
High fidelity crying smiley face.
Now, one of the things you may not be able to tell first thing off the bat, but this is where my tattoo was, and it's completely black.
Yeah.
As well as if we zoom in on something like this
the
eye
whites
shine,
of your eyes.
the whites of the eyes, or the hair, for instance. There's transparency that's supposed to be going on here. So this is where I was saying we're going to have to do a composite image, which is going to be the alpha information. So how we achieve that is we come back into the image. We're going to want to save this one, and we're going to save this as D for our diffuse layer for our image. Or I could have done O for opaque, but all we need to do to bake the alpha information, which is going to be a black and white image where all the white information on the image is where it's fully opaque, and where it's black is all of the transparent alpha information. So all we need to do is we just go to each material and we plug the alpha into the base color. You can see it turns completely white because the shirt is completely opaque. Same thing goes for the skin texture. And so wherever it's white, that's going to be opaque. Wherever it's black, is going to be transparent. Same thing with the hair. Hair is going to be a little bit different. So we're going to see all of the areas where the hair is white. Obviously opaque. Where it's not, it's going to be transparent. So
on the node, it looks like you have 2 nodes for the shirt tile. Do you need to do both of those alphas?
No, because this is the same image. I'm not entirely sure why I did the image twice. At the time, I thought you needed 2 nodes. I think that's why I did it, is I thought I needed 2 nodes, but you can actually plug in the alpha from the singular node. Yep. So then we'll do the same thing for this final one. And everything looks white right now, but you'll see that it's not going to look like this in the end, because wherever it's transparent on this texture itself, it's actually going to be black around that area as well. And then we'll composite that in GIMP, and I'll show you how we do that step. So once we have all of those assigned, I'm going to then reselect the texture we're wanting to bake to again, because we need to have that selected in order for it to know we're wanting to bake to it. And then we come back, scroll down, and hit bake again. Yeah, so you can see that all the white areas are where it's going to be completely opaque, and where the black areas are, those are going to be fully transparent when we composite the 2 in our image editing software. So I'm going to save this as not D, but A for alpha. And then we're going to come over here to where we have our images saved. And I'm going to hit F5 to refresh. We're going to open with GIMP. I use GIMP because it's free and it's still very powerful. And so does Theo.
Yes.
So then we're going to do is...
If you haven't used layers yet, oh my god, you've got to start.
Yes, especially for this process. So we can see laid exactly on top of our other texture is all of our alpha information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control A and Control C, so to select all and to copy. We're going to come to our diffuse image, and I'm going to right click and say Add Layer Mask, and then we're going to want to make sure black is our full transparency. We're going to say Add. It's going to add this little box. We're going to click and select it, and then we're going to hit Control V to paste. And once it's pasted, you can see it overlays it and then gives us our alpha information, but we're going to want to anchor it so it actually adds it to the image. And then we're just going to hit right click and apply layer mask. And there is our new image with our transparency. Now the fun part is we're going to come back.
Oh, seeing if it worked.
We're going to delete all of our materials now, and you can see how it's going through all those UV mappings. And we're going to create shoot on site atlas, and I'm going to use our what's that?
Oh, I'm sorry. So you just went through, deleted all the textures, and then used the plus button to add a new one?
Yes. Yeah. So
Okay.
to remove all of them, we're going to add one new material, and we're going to come into where we created our composite, which is the final texture, and we're going to connect it. Boom. Now, this is what I was saying, was that since this model is not using the original UV mapping, and it's using the new UV mapping that we created, what we're going to do is we come into now the UV map area. See how we have this one selected? We're going to delete this one, and there's our new texture atlas.
Except for the eyelashes.
Correct, yes. And how to correct that is we come in here, and because there's alpha information, we plug this into the alpha, our texture node, and we come into the material tab and scroll down, and oh, that's right, we are still in cycles, so the option won't show up. So we'll go back to Eevee, go back to our texture node, and go to alpha blend. Or there we go, alpha blend and none. Wait, is it alpha? Oh no, wait, it's alpha clip. I'm sorry, alpha clip, which is cutout. It's the same thing as cutout, as you can see.
Looks pretty good.
Yep.
You've successfully cloned yourself.
And you can see, I use this as a good reference point. So you can see the quality of the crystal looks the same, if not better, because it's scaled up more than what this one was.
It actually does.
Yeah. And those are the basics of texture atlasing. So yeah, now we have a fully optimized SWE model that is pretty much hyper optimized. It's just one texture atlas, and yeah, now you're good to go, and you'll have an excellent model if you don't add dynamic bones. But yeah, Theo, do you think you have a pretty good grasp on concept?
I do, and in fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and use this on Indent's avatar right about now, just to test out and see if I can follow this video.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Yeah,
Thank you very much for showing this. Like, it's been super useful.
Yeah, no problem at all. And again, to everyone, be sure to check out my Patreon, which I'll have linked in the description.
Yeah, because Swaz always willing to help with stuff like this. If you get stuck on a step, like seriously, just DM him and he'll help you through it.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you guys for stopping by, and have a happy time Avatar making or whatever the sign off is. So
have a good time sucking a little less.
yes. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, Swaz.